The Roman army was the most feared military force in the ancient world. They crushed their enemies, built an empire spanning 3 continents, and dominated for centuries. But then, something changed. The legions that once conquered the world started losing. They suffered humiliating defeats that shook the whole empire. And the worst part? Many of these disasters were very self-inflicted. So how did Rome go from an unstoppable superpower to an empire that couldn't even defend its own borders? Let's break down Rome's biggest military disasters and what they teach us about how empires fall. Rome's power wasn't built overnight. For centuries, their military was the best in the world. They had the most disciplined soldiers, superior battlefield tactics, advanced engineering including forts, roads, and supply lines, and unbreakable military traditions. By the time Rome was in decline, its army had completely changed, and the mistakes they made, they should be a warning for every empire out there today. First, let's talk about Hannibal, one of the greatest military minds in history. This dude didn't just beat Rome, he humiliated them. Rome thought they could crush Hannibal with a massive army. Bigger equals better, right? Wrong. At Cannae, Rome lined up with over 80,000 men, their biggest army ever. Hannibal, half that size. And in just one day, Hannibal trapped and massacred almost the entire Roman force. Over 50,000 Romans died, including senators, nobles, and Rome's best commanders. Moral of the story, overconfidence and bad strategy can destroy even the strongest armies. Rome had spent decades trying to bring Germania under control. The Germanic tribes were seen as uncivilized, weak, and divided. To fix this, Rome appointed a governor, Publius Quintilis Varus. Varus was overconfident. He trusted the wrong people. One of his top commanders was a German noble named Arminius, who had been raised in Rome and served in the Roman army. Varus thought Arminius was loyal. Big mistake. In 9 AD, Varus led 3 entire legions, over 15,000 men, deep into Germania, marching them through the dense, swampy Teutoburg Forest. The Romans were used to fighting open field battles, but now they were in Arminius's backyard. And then the trap was sprung. Tens of thousands of Germanic warriors emerged from trees, hurling spears, launching arrows, and cutting off escape routes. The Romans tried to fight back, but they just couldn't maneuver. Their formations, their discipline, their famous tactics, useless in the forest. Over 3 days, the legions were systematically slaughtered. By the end, not a single Roman soldier escaped. It was one of the worst military disasters in Roman history. Emperor Augustus himself was so devastated that he reportedly roamed his palace screaming, "Varus, give me back my legions!" Rome never tried to fully conquer Germania again. One bad decision, one overconfident general, and an entire province was lost forever. Fast forward to the late Empire. By this point, Rome wasn't expanding anymore. It was desperately trying to defend its borders. One of the biggest threats, the Goths, a coalition of warrior tribes fleeing from the unstoppable Huns. The Goths weren't there to invade, though. They were asking for help. Thousands upon thousands of them begged Rome for permission to cross the Danube River and settle inside Roman territory. Emperor Valens thought, no problem, we'll let them in and turn them into loyal Roman citizens. But instead of treating them fairly, corrupt Roman officials exploited them. What do you think happens when you starve, mistreat, and humiliate thousands of armed warriors? I bet you can guess it. They rebel. Valens underestimated them. Instead of waiting for reinforcements from the Western Roman army, he arrogantly marched out on his own. The Romans charged in, thinking it would be an easy fight. But what they didn't know, the Goths had hidden cavalry waiting for just out of sight. Once the battle began, they attacked from all sides. By the end of the day, 2/3 of the Roman army was completely wiped out. Emperor Valens, killed in battle. His body was never found. This was the beginning of the end for Rome's military dominance. The empire would never fully recover. For 800 years, no foreign army had set foot in Rome. It was the heart of the empire, the center of civilization. No one thought it could fall. Then came Alaric, leader of the Visigoths, a warrior who had once served in the Roman army, and now he was Rome's worst nightmare. Alaric didn't want to destroy Rome. He just wanted his people to be treated fairly. But when Rome refused to negotiate, he marched on the city. For months, Alaric's army surrounded Rome, cutting off all food and supplies. People inside started starving to death. There were reports of cannibalism. And then, in 410 AD, the gates were opened. The Visigoths stormed inside. Rome, the eternal city, was being sacked. For 3 days, the Visigoths looted, burned, and destroyed. Rome was absolutely humiliated. This wasn't the official end of the empire. But after this, Rome was never quite the same. For centuries, Rome's military was the greatest the world had ever seen. They built an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt, defeated every major rival, and created an army so advanced that modern militaries still study their tactics to this day. But in the end, it wasn't Rome's enemies that destroyed them. It was Rome itself. So what happened? How did Rome go from unbeatable to unprepared? From crushing armies to getting crushed? Well, as we mentioned earlier, bad leadership, which led to overconfident generals, which ignored reality, corruption, where the Roman elites were stealing from the military, arrogance, the underestimation of other enemies, overexpansion, they were spreading themselves way too thin, declining discipline, there was no discipline within the legions, and relying too much on foreign mercenaries. Eventually, you know how that goes. At first, Rome fought its own battles, but by the end, they had to hire outsiders to do their fighting for them. And when those outsiders realized Rome was weak, they stopped fighting for Rome and started fighting against it. And once the legions fell apart, the empire collapsed. This wasn't just a military failure. It was the end of an empire. Rome went from ruling the world to being wiped off the map. Here's where things get interesting, because if we zoom out and look at history, Rome's military decline sounds a little too familiar. Let's just compare 4th century AD Rome to today. There was massive military spending. There was the over-reliance on mercenaries. There was the overexpansion and spreading yourself way too thin. Political infighting and overall weakened discipline. Yes, Rome didn't collapse in just one day. It fell over many different eras and over many centuries. But the warning signs were there all along. They just didn't listen. So the real question is, are we repeating history? Drop a comment down below. Are modern superpowers following in Rome's path? Or is this just a history lesson with no connection to today? And don't forget to subscribe, because in the next episode, we're going to break down Rome's biggest political disasters. Because when the government collapses, the empire isn't far behind. See you next time.